All right. I think we'll get started. So I'm Dr. Murray Bessette, Vice President of Education here at Common Sense Society. As many of you know, being within our network already, Common Sense Society is an international network that promotes liberty, prosperity, and beauty, aspirational ideas that are indispensable to human flourishing and happiness. A critically important way in which we do our work is by supporting the efforts of America's hardworking teachers to educate future generations by providing them with materials and professional development opportunities at no cost to participants. I'm grateful that you have chosen to join this brief information session, during which I'll introduce you to one such resource. Understanding September 11th, 2001 was created 2 years ago for the 20th anniversary, and it's intended to help teachers educate their students about this important historical event that continues to affect our society and government. Now, before I provide a brief overview of why we created the module and the contents thereof, I do want to remind you that you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to ask any questions that you may have. Feel free to drop them in at any time. My intro here is only going to be about 5 minutes, and then I'll address them as they come in. So I'm sure that many of you, like myself, have very vivid memories of September 11th. Many may even be able to recount most of that day. I mean, I could. I'm not going to take the time to do so, but I was an undergrad. I vividly remember my friend calling me very early in the morning because I was on mountain time, waking me up much earlier than I wanted to tell me something that I found unbelievable. And I didn't believe it until I turned the news on and then saw the pictures for myself, and then spent the rest of the day, like most others, just glued to the screen, watching in horror and disbelief at what was transpiring. But K-12 students today, and even undergraduates, have no recollection of a pre-9/11 world. I mean, none of them were actually born before those events took place. Now, we must teach them about the events of that day so they can understand the lasting effects of the attacks and of our response to them. To give just one example, from my own teaching experience, and this goes back about 8 years ago, right? So my undergrads at that point, this was a freshman class. Most of them were 4 years old when the attacks took place. So they had no real recollection of anything. And they would see in television shows like Friends, people seeing people off at the gate at the airport or welcoming loved ones back directly at the gate when they arrived. And they actually thought that this was an invention of Hollywood, that in all the old movies and all the old TV shows where this was just a commonplace occurrence, as it was a commonplace occurrence in our lives before September 11th, they thought Hollywood made it up. And they were frankly shocked when I explained to them that that was actually a reflection of what we used to be able to do, right? And they came to understand one of the very real diminutions of liberty that came about as a reaction of our governmental reaction to the events of that day. Now, for students to properly and more fully understand exactly what happened that day and the lasting significance, there are some core questions that they need to learn the answers to, such as what actually happened, who was responsible, why those responsible did what they did, and how we chose to react to the events. And this is what the lesson plan, again, September 11th, or Understanding September 11th, 2001, is intended to facilitate, right? So in the contents of the module, there are 3 original essays. One that explains what happened on that day. One that clarifies the meaning of the term terrorism, a term that's thrown around quite a lot and is typically misused in our political discourse. And another essay that explains the origins of a new political ideology, that of Islamism, and properly distinguishes it from the religion of Islam. Also included are three primary sources that we think are very, very useful. One being an excerpt from the 9/11 Commission report, which explains why Islamist groups such as Al-Qaeda hate us. They hate Western peoples. They hate their co-religionists, the ones that are not believers in the Islamist ideology that they profess. Included are also a couple of fatwas issued from Osama bin Laden, justifying the actions that Al-Qaeda took that day, as well as a short video that recaps the terrible events of that day. It's less than 5 minutes long, put together by the Encyclopedia Britannica. I will mention, though, that there are a couple of swear words that appear in it. Just be forewarned. But it's a compilation of documentary footage that provides a better understanding of the timeline itself. Now, it's our hope that you will find the materials that we've assembled there to be useful as you engage your students in the necessary and inevitably difficult conversations surrounding that day. And that day is fast approaching for us, it being it'll be the 22nd anniversary this year. Now, at this point, I'd like to invite my colleague to drop a link to the module itself in the chat, just so that you can have ready access to it. And I would again invite any questions that you might have, just use the Q&A function. In the meantime, one thing that I will share, is a decision that we made in terms of counting the number of deaths that occurred. So you'll find this in the first essay. We do identify that 2,996 people died on that fateful day. And that I do want to note that includes the 2,977 civilians, as well as the 19 suicide murderers, the terrorists, because they are responsible for the sum total of all of them. We thought that it was important to accurately reflect the total scale of the loss of life that took place on that day, which some people have found that to be a little controversial, preferring just to enumerate those who were not responsible for the attack. I would also invite any comments from anyone who has used the materials, if that's the case. If you downloaded it in past years and used it with your students. I mean, we're always interested in receiving constructive feedback. If something worked really well, we like to hear it. But if something just didn't work, we're also very interested in hearing that. Our goal is to constantly improve the resources that we make available to educators. So, feel free to drop that in the chat or the Q&A, or if you wanted to, you can email it directly to me. It's just Murray, Murray, @commonsensesociety.org. All right, so we have our first question. Would the module cover a full day's worth of material for a middle school or high school teacher, or just a supplement? This is intended to cover one lesson during the day, and it is intended as a teacher toolbox. So, while we provide enough to cover a 45 or 50-minute lesson, we do encourage teachers to, select from amongst the options those things that they think will work best for their students. Let's see, next question. I teach 8th grade social studies. Should some parts be modified for middle school? This would be my first time using this lesson plan. I don't think that you would necessarily have to modify anything per se. I would very likely not use the video simply because of the language that occurs twice in it. But the essays themselves are written, basically at an average 10th grade level. And so if your middle school students are performing, above grade level, they'll have zero difficulty understanding what's in it. And of course, the primary sources, so the excerpt from the 9/11 Commission, as well as the fatwas themselves, are at a lower grade level than that. So I would think that your students would have no difficulty comprehending it, and that it would serve for a helpful basis for classroom discussion. All right, and another question. What do you think our students should learn from this event? That's a great question. Well, I mean, the first thing they need to learn is what happened on that day, why it happened, being able to understand the motivations of Islamist groups, their criticism of our way of life, and the incompatibility of, what they would like with, a choice-worthy and flourishing, system of liberty. That would all be important. But one of the other things that would make for, fruitful conversation, is unpacking how it is that we reacted to this, and whether or not we have, gone beyond what made sense. Have we given up too much liberty for the security that we receive for that diminution? Is the threat, that we faced, on September 12th, 2001, the same as the one that we face today in 2023? What we need are, citizens that become engaged in considering, public policy and how it is that we should be, securing ourselves going forward. And so engaging your students in those kinds of conversations, providing them with arguments, related to that, I think are very valuable, to them, but also to all of us, as they grow up and become voters and full citizens. Another good question. Is there an ideological basis or bent to the curriculum? I want to say no, simply because what we have tried to do is present things as clearly and as factually as we possibly can. But the truth of the matter is, we are on the side of liberty, prosperity, and beauty. And so, while we allow the opposing sides arguments or explanations or justifications to be presented in their own words, ultimately we would reject those. We're not so open-minded that our brain falls out. But it is important in terms of, developing the ability to defend one's way of life, to engage the arguments against that way of life in their strongest form, in their most persuasive form. And it's hard to argue that political Islamism hasn't been persuasive to a significant enough minority within the world that it's important for us to understand it on its own terms. Just as we would want to understand communist states on their own terms, or reflecting back to the Second World War, it was necessary to understand the Nazis on their own terms. Because until you understand those things, you're not going to be able to fully defeat them. All right, I think we have time for one more question. While we wait to see if it comes in, I'm going to remind you that my colleague has dropped the link for downloading the module in the chat. All right, well, I do want to thank you for joining again for this brief introduction, this information session on understanding September 11th, 2001. If in the coming days you have any questions, you should feel free to reach out. I would be more than happy to answer them to the best extent that I can. I do hope that you found this helpful. And of course, we'd love to stay in touch and be supportive any way we can. And for those of you who are here in the DMV region, I want to let you know that we'll be hosting an in-person teacher workshop later this month on September 27th in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you're local to the DMV, we'd love for you to attend. And my colleagues are going to share that information in the chat as well. And we will be following up with an email that will provide you the link to Understanding September 11th, 2001, as well as more information on the workshop later in September. Thank you for joining us.